This is the Gauntlet podcast. My name is Jason. I am joined today by Kate Bullock and Lowell Francis. Hi, Kate. Hi, Lowell.
Hey.
Hey.
And this is Favorite Games of 2018, our big gala episode that we do every year. It is a celebration of independent tabletop role-playing games, and I'm so excited to get started. Kate, what was your favorite game of 2018?
This was my biggest dilemma this year, was choosing a game of the year. Mostly because I struggle with the fact that my favorite game I've played this year not only is a playtesting game, but it's also a game by Magpie Games. And we all know I run convention games for them. So there's a professional tie there. But that being said, all of the games I've played this year are playtesting games. And the game that I got the most emotional feedback from and had the most complete stories and the mechanics were just beautiful was Cartel.
Awesome.
Which is the most recent game by Magpie Games about playing members of a cartel. And it's very telenovela. It's a very drama-filled story where it's about your emotional connections to one another. And that's what really grabbed me, is that I played the two roles that are very opposite. So I've played the El Narco, which is the one in charge of the cartel. And then I played La Esposa, which is the wife. And both were just so immediately grabbing me, and both propelled me into the fiction, and every playbook I saw just really, really sang. So, and plus it's a game about not white people. And I think that's important.
I agree completely. Yeah. It's so interesting. Well, first of all, I think that's a great choice. I have not actually played Cartel yet.
What?
I have owned the Ashcan for what seems like 100 years. And I'm calling you out, Mark. We should mention it's by Mark Diaz Truman. We didn't actually say that.
Right. Yes.
I've owned the Ashcan for a long time. And, at some point I'm going to play it. My history with Cartel is fairly well known in our circles. And I think it's super interesting that so just for the backstory, so that people who are maybe new listeners or whatever who don't have the context, or don't keep up with TTRPG industry drama, which is 99% of people. Yeah. A number of years ago when the Ashcan first came out, I kind of put it on blast a little bit because I thought that it glorified narcos and narco violence. And that was coming from a place of me being a border attorney who had many clients who were refugees from or suffered from narco violence. And so I felt like it was kind of irresponsible at the time. Right. And there was also a sort of secondary thing where I felt like it was kind of ignoring the sort of very brutal misogyny that's kind of wrapped up in narco violence that frequently doesn't get talked about. And I kind of felt like I felt like that conversation was not adequately getting discussed around the game. Right. And so at the expense of making this all about me,
it's okay. I like you.
At the time, a lot of people jumped down my throat about that. There were people, I had to put up with slings and arrows from Mark's friends for a long time after that. But Mark was actually the person who kind of, approached me and actually listened to what I had to say and wanted to make the game better as a result. And so I actually really super respected him for that. And that's long water under the bridge. I mean, we have, had him on the show a few times since then and talked about it and stuff. And so I think it's actually kind of neat that it is here now being featured as a favorite game on the Gauntlet podcast. I think it's kind of fun. But let's just get back to your relationship with Cartel. What do you think the Cartel does, apart from the fact that it's about people of color? What do you think that Cartel does that is different than other Powered by the Apocalypse games, or even different than other role-playing games?
There was this moment when I was playing the game for the first time where I went to call my husband feminine. I went to shame him for being not manly enough. And I thought it would just be on brand, in genre. We kind of discussed the role beforehand, and that's what Phil Vecchione was playing my husband. And that's what we had agreed was kind of our relationship as a woman who was running the cartel. And as I did that, the GM turned to me and went, "Are you emotionally abusing your husband?" And then there was a mechanic for that.
Nice.
And that was the first time I felt like I had ever played a game where emotional abuse was literally mechanized and discussed in a very interesting way, as a way that these people are coping with their stressful situation. And that's how it's perpetuated. And I thought that was very thoughtful and very on point, and had a deeper conversation happening that I think a lot of people don't think Cartel is talking about that until they play it.
That's really great. It's actually super great to hear because I have not yet had a chance to look at the new materials. And so I actually didn't know that it had some elements of that, but that's actually really awesome. Lowell, do you have any questions about Cartel or anything you want to say?
No, I'll say I used to be an acquisitions editor in academic press, and I did like Central American and Latin American studies, and we had a lot of titles dealing with the Mexican drug justice system and so on. So I was very nervous about the Cartel when I first saw it because of what I had read about that. And it was Mark's working through with commenters and talking with people about the issues and really listening to people during the Kickstarter, people who reacted very strongly. And he was very calm, and he walked through and he listened to them, and he talked about the ways in which the game was trying to unpack and reveal those kinds of details. And, his conversation made me go and back the game then.
I'd give kudos to Mark too, because I actually watched a lot of those conversations unfurling. I even watched some of those people using my original objections to the game as ammunition against the game. And they did not have the full context of my opinion of the game, right? I feel like some of those people during the Kickstarter did not deserve his graciousness. But nevertheless, I think you're right. He did engage in a really healthy, constructive way. But I wholeheartily reject the idea that was going around at the time through some circles that Mark was not, quote, Mexican enough to write the game. Like, that's just pure bullshit.
That happened.
Yeah, pure bullshit. I totally reject that. No matter what else you might think about Cartel, that is not an appropriate criticism, in my opinion. So,
I mean, I agree. And to bring it back to the abuse part, because there's also like beat someone up, like you lash out violently because you're too stressed. You can emotionally abuse someone, you can lose yourself in a drug, or you can go to church. And I thought that was a very interesting and setting specific and a really good choice. And I feel like the game does address all of that, and then also takes you back to the fact that you're stuck in this loop and you can't really escape. And do you want to? And by the time you want to, are you able to? And I thought that was very beautiful, as much as narcofiction can be beautiful.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a bunch of interesting games that have used that kind of built-in death spiral that's kind of in PBTA, where things, kind of spiral out of control, and really use that to drive the fiction over the last couple of years, and that's been really interesting. Blackout does that as well.
Well, Kate, is there anything else you want to say about your favorite game pick, Cartel?
No, I don't think so. I mean, my love for it is really obvious. And I think for a bunch of us white people who are like, oh my God, playing brown people, it's not an inaccessible game. Like, for those of you who are very nervous about you're going to be playing a different culture, like, suck it up, Buttercup, and go play the game, because you shouldn't not play games because you're uncomfortable with your whiteness. Like, that's bullshit. Don't buy into that, and don't let yourself get caught in that. You need to be playing games about people who look different than you do.
Also, I just want to throw in there one more thing. Props to Magpie, generally speaking, for doing this, right? I mean, you can look at Bluebird's Bride, you can look at Velvet Glove. These are all games that challenge you, even Urban Shadows to some degree, challenge you to play people who are not you, who are not the default in culture, right? And I think it's great.
Yeah. So that's my one ad is like, go play it. It's not inaccessible. It's not hard for you to play as a white person, and it's important for you to play. So, like, go fucking do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, listeners, we are now going to hear from some members of the Gauntlet community and their favorite games of 2018. Throughout this whole episode, you'll be hearing from hosts of our other podcasts, from community members who help organize and run the Gauntlet, and as well as just fans and listeners and community members. So let's begin that right now. Okay, listeners, I am here with Tomer Garantz. Tomer is the, I don't know what your title is yet, the Director of Community Care, Community Resources in the Gauntlet. For some time, Tomer has been in charge of welcoming brand new people to the community, get them oriented and figuring out what to do, and also kind of just heading up the various, community care related activities in the community. So now that I've said the word community 900 times, Tomer, welcome to the Gauntlet podcast.
Thank you very much for welcoming me. And I love it. I will be the Lord of Community. Sounds good.
Yes, very good. Okay, so here we go. Tomer Garantz. what is your favorite game of 2018? Even though I personally know the answer. So.
Of course. I think almost everyone knows the answer. My favorite game of 2018 is We Are Blob. It's this interest. I'm just kidding. It is For the Queen.
Not what I thought.
No, it is exactly what you thought. It is For the Queen. Anybody who's heard me talk about RPGs in the last, 6 months has probably heard me mention this game in passing, if not ad nauseum.
I have played it with you briefly at Big Bad Con, like every other human at Big Bad Con. I got a chance to play For the Queen. So.
Yep. No, it's a brilliant little game. What do you want to know about it?
Well, so we've never covered it on the show, not yet. And so definitely give us just like an overview of what is For the Queen, like what's it all about?
Sure. So the premise is the same almost every time, and it's a very simple premise. Basically, all of us who are playing, and only us, right, as players or characters, are part of a small retinue, and we're traveling with the Queen. And this is a perilous journey to broker an alliance with a distant power, right? This is all verbatim kind of from the game. And the Queen has brought us because she knows that we love her. And notice the way it's phrased. It doesn't say that you love her. It's not telling you that. It's just saying the Queen knows that you love her. And that's the starting point of every game of For the Queen. Now, as far as how it plays, like a lot of indie RPGs, I think that some of us in the Gauntlet are familiar with, you start with no character. In this case, no character at all, like 0. And we just start answering questions, taking turns one by one, and there's a deck of cards that have these questions on them. And the questions are almost entirely about your relationship with this queen, but occasionally also other things like, what you think of the journey or the land you're traveling through or the royal court back at home or whatever. And as you're playing the game, from the very simple standpoint, we're just basically answering how we relate to this other person that nobody in the table's playing, right? This is a GM-less game, or GM-full game, if you will. And all of us are just answering these questions. And by the end of the game, you have this kind of like fantastic character that's been created in the space between all of us, which is very interesting. So that's the basic premise of the game, but there's more, of course.
No, I love it. I got a chance to play a partial game, at least, at Big Bad Con. The cards came out kind of late in the night, somewhere around the 2 or 3 in the morning time frame, and I was not able to hang in with it. But I really thought it was interesting because we were each playing a character, clearly. We were all answering questions in character, but we didn't have names. We didn't have very specific individual identities. But what I loved about it, and it was a huge group, by the way, that should also be pointed out. It was something like 15, 20 people. Yeah, it was huge. And as everyone's answering the questions, even though we have not agreed on who our characters are, or we have not spoken it out loud, and even though we have a very, very sketchy sense of what is even going on in the story, as it were, I started to notice that everyone began developing story, right? You were paying attention to what other people were saying, and you were kind of filling in the gaps with your own answers to the questions. And you even made references to other characters and things, and usually by just pointing, whatever. Right. But, because there are no names.
Yeah. And one thing that's, I think, fascinating about this game is 99% of the time at the end of the game, none of us have names, and you have totally fleshed out characters, but you have no name. Yeah. And I think that alone is just kind of interesting and weird. But I think one of the most relevant things about it, if the game was just how I described it to you and answering these questions, that's one thing. And that would be a great game, an interesting game. But one of the most interesting things is as your turn, let's say you're the active player and you're answering a question, everyone else around this table can ask you clarifying questions. So yes, you answered a question and that's one part, but now I can ask you a question it could be very simple. How do you feel about that? Or, why did you do that thing, right? Or it could be a lot more complicated and it can be very leading. And that's where the game can start diving into kind of new depths. So although, I think Alex Roberts, who wrote the game, and she's the same mind behind Starcrossed, right? When we played this game initially in the very early part of this year in March, that was the first time I was exposed to it. And it might have been the first playtest outside of playing with her family, with a group of us. When we played it, she gives time frames for the game of 30 minutes to an hour. And that definitely tracks for people who are not really used to playing role-playing games or story games, or maybe new to the game and they're just kind of like feeling it out. It can be a very short game, something you play in line for the movies with your friends. Like you don't need dice or tables or anything. It's fantastic. But I played this game recently on the Gauntlet with, some heavy story game Gauntleteers, and we only played half the deck, which is the 30-minute game, and it ended up being a 3.5-hour game. So, I mean,
I can see that.
Yeah, if you want to dive into it, you can dive into it.
That's awesome. Well, that's so great. I know, like you mentioned, it's written by Alex Roberts. I know it's being published by Evil Hat. Is it out yet?
It is out around the corner. They just sent an update on Twitter recently, in the last week, that it was kind of being sent toward like production or that kind of thing. They already put out a draft set of cards, maybe over a month ago. That looks like a final product. So it's supposed to be out, early to mid 2019. I'm hoping toward the early side because I keep getting asked about this all the time.
And it's like going straight to sales, right? It's not like a Kickstarter.
Straight to sales, not a Kickstarter. Yeah. And one of the fantastic things, if you're a player on Roll20, they're going to have a Roll20 deck specifically for this, and you can buy it in the Roll20 marketplace. So you can buy kind of in quotes here, like a virtual kind of PDF copy, if you will, in Roll20. I do want to mention a couple other things about the game real quick, the things that I find fascinating and great, and it could be very short. So one of the things that I think this game does so brilliantly is it has built-in safety mechanics. You can actually sit down and just play the game, and you don't even have to talk about things like the X card and line and veils, because it's built into the instructions of the game that we will go through and that we all agree to as playing the game. The way the X card works is just like you'd expect. You can X out any content, but you can also X out any question card. So, if you pick up a question and it looks, you don't like it for any reason, you can X it and just get a new question. And this has really strong impacts on tone. It's a great training vehicle because invariably every game people will use the X card a couple times just for little things. And so it's like super amazing X card training, right? The tone is all over the place. It's totally up to the players where they want the tone of the game to be, as well as the pace. So I mentioned that it could be a very short or long game, and that's kind of depending on us. We can X cards quickly to get through stuff. We can take our time and ask questions of a character. That other player that we're asking questions to, they can decide to not answer questions. Like, you never have to answer a question. You can say, I prefer not to answer that question. So all of that affects, your safety, your tone, your pace. And I think it's just so integral in the game that it's just beautiful. So those are some of the things I think are just amazing about it, is that it's like this story game training vehicle almost, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's
and
cool.
You even mentioned it in your experience, is that you basically are really much paying attention to everybody else because you can always ask questions. Everyone's kind of in the spotlight at the same time, right? So you're always involved. And I think it lends a sense of presence that you don't always get with role-playing games. I mean, I know a lot of indie games and a lot of table culture, like in the Gauntlet, we're very present with the other players. But, and a lot of people come from games like D&D or others where maybe there's like combat initiative and then you have to wait 10 minutes.
Your phone or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And there isn't that downtime. And the last thing I'll just say is I found it extremely flexible. So yes, I told you we played in the serious deep role-playing version. The first time I did that with some other Gauntleteers like Lauren and Ryan and my friend Trey at Big Bad Con. And that was an experiment. We had extra cards to ask kind of interpersonal questions that I had developed based on their feedback of the first game we played online. And we had this really intense, deep, role-playing kind of version of the game. But I found since then that you kind of don't need that. All you need is just to ask more questions, and be in that zone. You were and this is the first time I ever ran a game for you. We ran the first party game version of the game. That was the very first time we played with over 6 players. And so I've done that a couple times since then, even online in the Gauntlet for Gauntlet Games Now and for GauntletCon. And I played it during exercise at Big Bad Con. We did a 5K run, and we played for the Running Queen. We played after the dance party at Big Bad Con for the Dancing Queen. And that had like...
Ours was bees.
We played bees in ours. And then there's one version I haven't tested yet, which I'm really gunning to. And I was talking to Noella last night about it, which is a 2-player version. Because Noella, they've been playing like a lot of 2-player games on the Gauntlet. And I think that would be fantastic. This game is quoted to be 3 to 6 players. But I think a 2-player game could be interesting where maybe we're different facets of the Queen herself, or maybe we're things she's carrying or her familiars. Who knows?
Awesome. Well, that is a fantastic pick for favorite games of 2018. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. And thank you so much for all of your help this year.
Absolutely. I love the community, so it is a pleasure.
Fantastic. Let's go listen to some more favorite games of 2018.
Hello Gauntlet, this is Gerrit Reininghaus. I want to tell you about my favorite game of 2018. It's Our Mundane Supernatural Life. That is a wonderful free game by the Story Brewers, by V. Hendrell and Haley Gordon. And it's a very short, fantastic game about one day and a couple of whom one is a supernatural being and the other one is just a mundane human being. And the amazing mechanic, which I like so much in this game, is that every scene has a timer, and you roll a die to see how long the scene will go, like 2 to 5 minutes or something. And when the timer rings, the scene is immediately over. That leaves you with such an emotional intensity. I recommend this game.
Hey, I'm Mikael from Norway, and my favorite game of 2018. Well, first of all, it's been a hard one to determine, but my favorite game of 2018 is The King is Dead by Vincent M. Baker. Because it's a lot of fun and very easy to run, and I run a lot of one-shots, so I can really enjoy something that's easy to set up, and has a lot of replayability. This game definitely has that. In addition to that, it has some very interesting mechanics, which is completely unique to the game. And of course, that's something I really appreciate as someone who plays a lot of different games and likes to see something new and innovative. I really enjoyed it, and I've played it on several occasions on a Gauntlet, and also at cons where people don't play these games, and it's been enjoyable every time I tried it. So, my favorite game of 2018, The King is Dead.
This is Christopher Gray. I have the opportunity to play a lot of different kinds of games over this past year, and the one that I keep coming back to time and time again is 10 Candles by Stephen Dewey. That game really is, in my view, one of the best machines for creating a memorable experience. Every time I run it or play it, I leave a little bit changed. And I think that probably has something to do with the wonderful people that I get to play with. But there's also something in the machine that does that. And I think the built-in tension mechanic and the constant spiral into whatever oblivion you're going to face really allows you to explore some very powerful themes, and I always feel like when I'm done with a session that I went through something very transformative with the people at the table, and I feel closer to them. And every time I've run it, it just sort of stays in my memory as a substantial part of a substantial experience. So I think I'm going to have to call that one out, and I encourage anybody who hasn't played it to pick it up and give it a try. Looking forward to an exciting 2019. Take care.
So I'm here with Patrick Knowles, one of my favorite players, a veteran Gauntlet player. And this year, an exciting and awesome Gauntlet GM. He's joined us on that side of things. So, Patrick, a lot of people have been struggling with their choice, and I've asked them if they had one that they kind of were going to do, but didn't. Was there one that you were kind of close to?
Definitely. I've gone back and forth about what I've played this year, and I've played a lot of really good stuff. But I have played a ton of Monster Heart sessions this year, and I know it's like the ultimate Gauntlet cliche to go with Monster Hearts as a big influential game. But did you know that Monster Hearts is this big influential game that had a lot of impact on me? I know.
And the beautiful Wicked and Divine stuff that you've been doing that people are loving. I've had
a super fun time with, once again, We Return is my pretentious name that I've been calling it, but I built up sort of this nice extended stable of players that have come in and out of it. It's players with Gauntlet I've never gotten to play with before a lot of the time, and like the characters of the players, the whole experience has been amazing.
So if that isn't your pick, what is your pick?
So what is my pick this year is something that I've played almost as many sessions, if not more, of Monster Hearts in a bunch of different arcs. But it's definitely Hearts of Wulin by our own Emmy Award-winning Lowell Francis. Perhaps you've heard of it.
So you're digging it. I'm glad. Tell us what you like for it. And I have to say, somewhat embarrassed that you're talking about a game that I wrote. So, but yeah, what have you done?
I didn't tell you beforehand. Haha, surprise. No, it's amazing. It synthesizes all of the best bits of the like melodrama, character emotional games that I've seen or played in, but puts them all in this like hard on your sleeve, but not in a way that bogs down so much that we can't also have badass fight scenes. I love the encouragement and the ability to just go over the top with descriptions on visuals or on complicated martial arts maneuvers. And I love that every part of the game constantly loops you back and points you towards the other players and how you're interacting with them and how you're miscommunicating with them and how that's building up into these like elaborate constructs of misunderstandings and lies and disguises and secret identities, and then it all comes crashing down in this glorious moment of combat and heartfelt close-ups, and everything is beautiful and sleek and amazing, and it hits all of my high points. I think especially like I see as the central piece move to the Hearts of Wulin is the inner conflict, where something is like hard and emotional and hitting your entanglements with other players, and you have to see whether you deal with it stoically and calmly or whether you freak out and run away a little bit. But I am definitely a player that tries to angle towards and enjoys the moments where you have mixed success or where you lose, but I have never run across a move where I am so constantly rooting for, but maybe I'll fail this time.
I'm so glad. You know, your character in that first game was so good. Like right out of the gate, you helped frame what I wanted out of the game. Like that was great. So I'm glad you're enjoying it because you've played a lot of it. Yes,
I have, and I think that, you know, that being able to play a great character right out of the gate speaks to another strength of the game, in that like I'm not super immersed in the genre. I've seen some of these sorts of movies, but not 1,000 of them. And the game absolutely points you towards very playable archetypes without at any point, I think, pushing you towards unfortunate stereotypes. Like there are the trappings of this genre and the melodramatic Chinese Wulin world, but these characters at the heart are understandable, simple relationships. They're human interactions, and that makes everything so accessible.
Yeah, I wonder how much for me it's that I wanted to run Monster Hearts, but I wanted to be able to still have action moments that I could go to. Like I'm insulating myself from that. Thank you. I've loved playing it. I'm glad you dug it. So that makes me super happy.
It's been an amazing experience. I cannot wait to see how it evolves in the future. And like, there's a Kickstarter coming up, so people should watch that.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lil. This was awesome.
My name is Barry, and my favorite game of 2018 is Patrick Knowles' Once Again, We Return. I want to start by saying that if I've played a game with you this year, I can promise you two things. I loved it, and you were amazing. But this game is my catnip, and it's my kryptonite. It takes the pop star godliness of the comic book, The Wicked and the Divine, which is high in the running for my personal all-time fave, and lays that over Monster Hearts 2, which is a game that I have been dying to play ever since I learned about it. And the end result of taking these gods and putting them on top of skins and putting that on top of people underneath it all makes it like worldwide wrestling, but on a mythic scale. And even when you're playing it small, it's like a sold-out arena show. The mechanics of the game, it's Monster Hearts with really cool moves that help support the fiction, but it's not the mechanics, it's the production of this game that makes it so special to me. I joined the Gauntlet in June, and I knew it would be a while before my schedule and the Hangout schedule lined up, so I checked out the first session on YouTube, and what I found was so clearly a product of Gauntlet play culture. I wanted everything that they had. Now I'm in the third month of its quarterly run with a group of players and a GM who are just so thoughtful and enthusiastic and, like, above anything that we would do in a game, just care about each other. And going from being a stranger who just thought it was cool and kept talking about it to being welcomed into it, like I was always a part of it, it's not something that just happens. That's a function of a community that embraces things like safety tools and open tables and recording and the community itself. And all of that has made it just an all-time highlight in role-playing games for me and an easy pick for my game of the year.
Hey, I'm Agatha Chang, or at AZNSRepresent on Twitter. And my favorite game of 2018 is, technically not a game of 2018 because it comes out officially in 2019. It's Hearts of Wulin by Lowell Francis. If you listen to the Gauntlet podcast, which considering you're listening to this episode, I'm assuming you do, you've heard about this game. It's a powered by the apocalypse game meant to emulate classic wuxia stories like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and the Shaw Brothers films. It's my favorite game because, first of all, it's set in a world I love. I grew up reading stories by Jin Yong and watching wuxia TV shows and I just have a deep love for this genre. It's really intense and sometimes really sad, but at the same time, there's these like really cool action scenes. The mechanics of this game evoke that setting and tone just super well. It sets up and supports melodramatic stories of the struggles between duty and desire of powerful martial arts heroes. And you're constantly split between doing what is right and doing what your heart desires, all while busting out these sick-ass martial arts moves. It's a great game, and I highly recommend checking it out when it comes out in 2019.
All right, so I'm here with Sherry Stewart, who, full disclosure, is my wife. So we are married, and there we go. So, Sherry, you played a lot of games this year, and we're going to ask you for your favorite pick of this year. Was it a struggle, or was it pretty easy to pick the one you wanted?
For me, it was very easy to choose the one that I want. It blew everything else out of the water. But I do have a runner-up that I dearly love and surprises me how much I love it.
Which is?
Okay, my runner-up is 13th Age. I don't know why, but I play that game and I always enjoy myself. I have a good time. The table has a good time. It flows right. It has the level of crunch that I enjoy and the level of narrative control that I enjoy. Just lovely and fun.
So what is your actual pick then?
Well, this is going to sound like nepotism, but it is Hearts of Wulin. Every session of that game has been a joy to play. It astounds me how much the way that the entanglements work to create the most amazing, amusing melodrama and pathos and excitement. I love watching what everyone else is doing. I love doing what I get to do. It's like for every character, there's a movie, or the movie of what's happened in the game could have had either any one of the characters as the main protagonist, and it would completely make sense. Just such a joy to play. and a joy to be in the game.
Do you have a favorite moment or a favorite move from it?
Oh,
I don't want to say too much more since I wrote it. I want to be
no. Do I have a favorite moment? Gosh, I don't know. You know what? It's just this sort of, how do you say, joyful smile remembering all of it. So I think probably my favorite. Nope, I don't have anything favorite. It's all the best.
Okay.
That sounds really weird, but it is such a stream of joy to play that game.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good pick. But
I really do love it so much.
So thank you much for giving us that pick. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Leandro Pondoc, and my favorite game of 2018, the game that I've run and played and cried over the most, it's actually not out of alpha playtesting yet, but I'd be lying if I said it was my favorite game. It's called Ascendancy, Those Left Behind. It is a hack of Grant Howarth and Christopher Taylor's Spire. If I have to give the one-sentence pitch for Ascendancy, it's basically anime psychic cyborgs trying to figure out who they are amidst a war-torn cyberpunk city. It's basically, well, you play these characters called Ascended, who have basically been modified and given fantastical, world-changing abilities. But the people who modified them, this fascist regime called the Uplift, have recently been, toppled, and this city that they all live in is trying to figure out what's it like to live in a post-fascist, post-totalitarian world. And your characters, the Ascended, are part of that because they're basically ordinary people who have been re-engineered as weapons. And so the great thing about Ascendancy is that it's basically using the Spire system of being able to affect the world in big, world-changing ways and using it to tell a story about identity, about trying to figure out who they are. Are you a weapon? Are you the person who you were before? Did these new abilities define you? And Ascendancy has such a breadth of ideas for your playbooks and the advances or the moves that you can make. Like, there are glitch types or temporal types who can mess with timelines. There are shadow types, and there are people who have to sacrifice their memories to become better at what they do. It's really great. It's still in alpha playtesting, and I hope there's a 2.0 coming out next year, and I hope it gets more eyes on it soon.
Hi all, it's Asher, and my pronouns are they, them. This is my second year doing Best of the Year game for the Gauntlet. I'm so excited. This year, my favorite game was Spindlewheel by Sasha Renaud and Cabbage Tea Games. Spindlewheel is a tarot-like storytelling game where you use cards as anchors to weave stories together with friends. I really love this game because there's just so many options. If you feel uncomfortable GMing, there are GM-less modes. There's a solitaire mode where it's just like tarot cards. You play as a character and use the cards as reactions or do different things. There are different mini games using the same cards, so you could be a detective investigating a crime scene or a group of detectives investigating a crime scene. There's just so many things you can do. I ran it on the Gauntlet trying to emulate a Fate module, which was really interesting, called the Breakfast Cult. So it was like a anime high school RPG, but we were doing it using these tarot cards. And it actually worked out pretty great. So that's my pick. I've had a lot of fun with this, even if I haven't been playing right. It's great. Yeah, I recommend other people check it out. Have a great year, y'all.
Hi, my name is Evan Torner, and my favorite role-playing game of 2018 is undoubtedly Trouble for Hire by Kevin Allen Jr. and published by Nathan Paletta with NDP Design. why I think this game is so awesome is because you're playing this badass action hero, Ruben Carlos Ruiz, but you're also playing all of the different antagonists that he encounter, as well as the supernatural and any number of different challenges. It is definitely a narrative-driven story game, but with lots of mechanics that support that narrative so that you can do an amazing homage to the 1970s. I'm just going to read some of the text here. This game is not the real world. It is a campy, rusty, grindhouse late-night double-feature fireworks display. It is pure, uncut, stylized bombast, a gonzo psychotronic survey of nearly half a century in fashion and technology and survivors living at the edge of ruin. In an analog electric drug trip, we, the bravest of game players, go to an America that was on the tip of a generation's tongue but never spoken. The tattered flags of trash culture and machismo fly above the battlements, and thusly this game salutes them. When does this game take place? That's a dumbass question. Inspired by the 1970s, born in the teenage years of the 21st century and encompassing everything in between and beyond, Trouble for Hire takes place in sort of an illusory age with no sell-by date. Things look like they are all pre-80s grit and gristle, and then someone whips out their laptop and Googles something, and we go right on living. What I'm trying to say is the specifics don't matter for shit. What counts is the feeling and the atmosphere, the smell of the thing. This book smells good.
Hi, this is Greg Gelder. My favorite game of 2018 is Stonetop by Jeremy Strandberg. I got the opportunity to playtest Stonetop at Gauntlet Con 2018. It is not yet released. I'm talking directly to you now, Jeremy, wherever you are. You need to release this game. Jeremy has taken apart Dungeon World, looked at all of the pieces. He's obviously played this through and through and has tweaked every little knob and found every little flaw and fixed it. Instead of wandering adventurers, you instead are attached to the community of Stonetop, and your playbooks, which have so many possibilities, already have these relationships built in to the town of Stonetop right when you start off. And I hope Jeremy rolls really well on his fortunes this spring, and we are granted the boon of this game sometime next year.
Okay, I am here with game designer and editor of the Codex RPG zine, Lauren McManaman. Lauren, welcome back to the Gauntlet podcast.
Hi, Jason. Thank you so much for having me back.
So, Lauren, tell us your favorite game of 2018.
Oh my gosh. Well, I played, as everyone knows, way too many games on Gauntlet. So it was really hard to just pick one for my game of the year.
It's hard. It's really tough.
I think I had the sort of good fortune of playing a bunch of playtests. I was like, oh, at least those ones I can park for 2019. So I think for this year, I've gone with Good Society, a Jane Austen RPG by Haley and V of the Story Brewers.
Awesome. Well, so I actually think I don't think we've talked about Good Society on the podcast yet. So maybe give listeners just an overview of what the game is about.
Oh my gosh, yes. So I guess in a really high level nutshell, you work together with the fellow players at the table to pretty much build your own Jane Austen novel. The game structure is built into chapter cycles. So it's it leads you through sort of each chapter in your Jane Austen novel to build this very high drama sort of Regency story game bullshit stuff that I love.
Story game bullshit that you love. That's fantastic. So does it, I'm not as super familiar with it mechanically. What's its underlying system? Is it PBTA like their last game was, the Alas for the Awful Sea, or is it something different?
So it's very sort of free-form RPG. It has its own new mechanical structure to it that is the reason why it's my game of 2018. So as I said, it's sort of broken up into this structure format of you'll have different phases to walk through. A chapter phase, which is just people calling scenes for hey, I want a scene with character A and B because I feel some good drama is going to come from that, and you kind of do that until you get bored. And then you move through these other phases that are you get to spread rumor and scandal, which is fantastic because it's just a bunch of Regency gossip about oh, I hear so-and-so is in debt to so-and-so for a bet that went wrong. And so you put out those story hooks and to see what sticks with everyone else, what everyone is keen to pursue. And then my other favorite part of it is like there's a letter writing phase. So like you get to narrate like letters to other people at the table to say like, you know, dearest so-and-so, it was much to my chagrin that you and I fought so tremendously at the ball last night. Both of us made such a scene of ourselves, and I would like to like extend my apologies. And you sort of get to very, very in character and in a ledger. So you do that, like, that's pretty much like the game cycle. And then mechanically, again, why I love this so much is it's very much just like a yes and kind of mechanical structure to something the roll back a bit. Yeah, so like the reason why I love the mechanical structure to Good Society is it's this very collaborative story game, conversational mechanics going on. So like if you want to introduce like a conflict to make the game more complicated, all you say to like your fellow players is like, hey, I really want this carriage to overturn on the way to the ball. And if that's going to negatively impact another character, you turn to that character's player and you say like, hey, I will give you like a resolve token if this bad thing happens. And then they have the authority to say, oh yes, that is super cool, I will take your token. And then like tokens have another currency benefit to them in other aspects of the game. They also have the choice to say like, oh yes, I want that, but only if this happens. So that there's like a negotiation sort of like consent process built into it. Or they can just flat out say like, no, I don't want that. And then that doesn't happen. And I love that tremendously because sort of narrative control and agency are so baked into that system that it's really hard to have a bad time with it because you're always in control of like your character. You're always like negotiating with other players, like how the story unfolds. And it's just like a very fun, collaborative, like feel good, but lots of like evil drama stuff going on. So that's why I love all the consent mechanics going on. I think they're lovely.
I love it when games have a really strong fictional negotiation baked into the mechanics. I really love that. And I think story games need it because I think that it's often difficult to do the sort of very like in the spotlight, freeform, improv-y kind of role playing that story games frequently, especially story games from like, say, 10 years ago, frequently wanted us to do, right? And so games that sort of decrease that cognitive load and really minimize that like pressure, and by offering and by giving the players a chance to negotiate with one another and to bounce things off one another, I think it's super powerful. I really, really love that. I think it's sharp design, and I think it acknowledges and addresses like what is a common problem with freeform story games, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. Like I for sure played some similar, like other freeform story games that aren't as aware of like sort of narrative control and agency and authority for the player character. And yeah, like sometimes it can run into like a bit of hurt feelings or like needing to exercise safety tools outside of like the game to negotiate those spaces. And like Good Society has baked into the mechanics, so it's really cool to see the safety tools like the negotiation process being really solid safety tool that's like part of the game that you play. And then another great thing about it is so quick. Like it's not this like labored process where you have to sort of figure out all like the details and stuff, or like go through a bunch of steps or roll dice or anything. It's like the conversation is as simple as like, hey, would it be cool if this happened? And then the other character player is like, oh yeah, that's so great, yes, that happens. And then like you give tokens over and then you keep going. Like it's so light and effortless, and I just it's really clever design.
I love it. I think combined with a structure too, like that structure that you outlined that seems to really emulate the genre that they're going for there, is probably really powerful. You know, I'm thinking of games, you know, like Fiasco. It's a game I love, but Fiasco has that problem. I think everyone's experienced it, where you go through that very interesting setup process and then you get to the first scene and no one knows what to do, right? And so it has this like kind of kicking off problem, right? It sounds like this game avoids a lot of that with the negotiation and with the structure of the game. And I think that's great. It's really, really good to hear. I am excited to check it out at some point. It gets run all the time on the Gauntlet, so I should probably figure out a way, except only in like Aussie time. So I need to sort that out. I think Sabine ran it. Yeah, Sabine ran it like in some evening Euro times. I might try to jump in one of those at some point. But
I know that I need to run it on the calendar more as well, and because it's so fantastic, I'm looking at doing like I've told Villainy and Haley about this like a high school 80s hack of it, called Gnarly Society.
Oh yeah, I'm in that. Wait, what was it? Say again?
It's presently called like Gnarly Society, so it's like sort of taking the similar structure, to sort of emulate sort of that 80s like high school film kind of genre. So like, yeah, I'm excited for that.
I think that's great. Yeah, I think that would be really fun to play. Awesome. Well, is there anything else you want to say about Good Society? Your favorite game of 2018?
I feel like there is so much more I could say because it's all of the story game BS that I hold dear to my heart with like amazing concept mechanics. But I'll park it there for now. And yeah, like you need to play a lot more of this game.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. And Lauren, thank you so much for all your help this year on Codex and everything else you do in the community, running games and whatnot. And I'm looking forward to a really fabulous 2019.
Oh, yes, me too. Thank you again for having me on. It's been lovely.
Okay, we are back. Any award-winning blogger, Lowell Francis. We had to, just for old time's sake. What is your favorite game of 2018, sir?
All right, so I do have to preface this that if I hadn't written it and if it weren't not out, I would have chosen Hearts of Wulin because it's done everything I wanted it to do this year. I hate to say that, but there were some games that were runners-up for me. I mentioned Blackout that I thought was really awesome. Passione de la Passions. The unmasked setting for Cypher system, even though I don't like Cypher, the unmasked setting is really amazing. Had some great games with Blades in the Dark and with the Changeling the Lost PBTA hack. But my pick is a evergreen Gauntlet game, but it's actually not the game as a whole. I actually need to point to a particular session.
Okay, yeah.
And so at Gen Con, I was lucky enough to have a chance to run for Magpie.
Thank you.
With Kate managing the room and the best convention experience I'd ever had. And I ran 6 sessions, 6 4-hour sessions. And Saturday night rolled around, and that was going to be the last one, and I thought I was done. Like, I thought I was toast by that point. And when I got there, I realized that there had been a mix-up, and the scenario starter that I thought I was running was in fact not the one that had been advertised to the players, that I had misread an email. And that'd be okay because it's PBTA, it's masks, but it was like a really completely different one. Like the one I was supposed to run was them being on the run from the law, which is like a really different conceptual thing. And I had like 5 minutes to like not grind my gears, and people were helpful by saying, oh, well, you can just wing it. And I wanted to go, fuck you. But anyway, so I got to the table, and there were a couple of young women who had been kind of waiting. Like, they were clearly excited, and they were waiting there when I got to the table, and they loved masks. And one of them had a notebook with illustrations and that she had done for all these characters. And she had all kinds of like cool pictures and notes and things. And then other people showed up, and we had a table of 5 with 3 women, 2 men, and they all love masks. Like, they came in, they were so ready for it. And we had a kind of an interesting conversation before we started about what they wanted to do. And just their enthusiasm completely changed my attitude. And I ran, and I built off of what they had actually said. Like, in the conversation before we even started, somebody mentioned that they really loved one of the villains from the deck. So that was going to be the villain. And I pulled that out later. And it was just a great session. Players got into it. I felt like I was doing a good job, where I could push them to do things. Everyone got an arc. Like, in the course of this 4-hour session, we did character creation, and everybody had an arc where they made choices about their character's development. The game allowed us to do that, and it was great. The epilogues were the best epilogues I'd ever seen at a con game. And I walked away loving masks. Like I had such a good time running it. Masks showed how good it was. And it showed me how many people out there, for them, how important this game was, how it gave them a tool to do these kinds of stories, and it was great. That one session was so amazing for me. I felt empowered afterwards. I thought that the players were all amazing, and that's why I had to pick Masks.
That is super interesting. What I'm hearing as you're speaking is Masks is a game that has a fan base and a community around it.
Oh my goodness.
Right? And I think that like the community and fan base that a game inspires, I think that is a rubric by which you can measure a game sometimes, because I think it says something about the game, right? And so, obviously something fundamental or intrinsic about the game allowed you to adapt to the situation and have that really like awesome, session for sure. But I think there's also something to be said about like a game's ability to inspire, right? And I think that's important. And I think it's maybe something that we don't consider often enough, ironically, in the Gauntlet. And so I think that's really something.
The playbooks all pushed really interesting questions and really interesting choices. And then the tools you have for shifting labels, which, at times they kind of felt a little clunky, but here they sang. Like I was able to kind of bring those in, and they meant something, and they did something significant. And so when I said, do you think they're shifting your label? Then that was a hard choice. Like that, was their mother doing that? And they would say, the yes or no, and they knew it. They had their headcanon in just an hour of character creation. It was dynamite.
That's awesome. Kate, do you have any questions or thoughts about Masks?
I mean, one of the most fascinating things for me, having worked running convention games for Magpie in the last couple conventions, was the absolute dedication and love people have for Masks. Like, you don't see that in any of their other games. Masks has these people who show up with tattoos and t-shirts that they've made of their characters, and these long-running stories and art. And I get emails updating me about their campaigns now. And I've been roped into the Masks mad love that is there. And it's so beautiful. And so I'm going to give you one thing that made me really happy about PAX Unplugged. Brendan Conway's parents came to watch the room being run of Masks and got to see his game running 5 different tables, and people loving it and telling their stories of how much they love this game. And that I've never seen another game do that.
Oh, it's so good. It's a good story.
Dynamite.
Right. It makes me so happy.
Love it.
And that was beautiful and wonderful. But Masks, I think, is really interesting because I had a friend who is a child psychologist who specifically deals with trauma. And he played Masks, and it blew his mind. And he was like, I need to get all of my kids playing this game. It really shows you child psychology on the paper. And he's been running it now for his kids, and it's helping them actually learn to talk about their trauma through this role-playing game.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I love it. Well, Lowell, is there anything else you want to say about your choice for favorite game 2018? Masks?
No, I'm just happy I got the chance to do that. That was one of the best experiences I had this year.
Awesome.
I'm so glad.
Fantastic. Let's go listen to some more community favorite games of 2018. Okay, listeners, I am here with my co-host from the Discern Realities podcast, as well as one of the editors of the Codex RPG zine, David Lafreniere. Hi, David.
Hey, Jason. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. So, David, reveal to us, what is your favorite game of 2018?
This may not come as a surprise to listeners of the Discern Realities podcast, but my pick for 2018 is the game supplement, The Cold Ruins of Lastlife.
Nice.
From Magpie Games, yeah.
Yeah, from Magpie and written by Brendan Conway, we should say. Awesome. Well, so, we've talked about this a little bit on Discern Realities already in episode 59, I believe. And so, listeners, you should definitely go check that out as well. But real quick, just tell us, why'd you pick it?
Well, first of all, this game is something that I ran a lot of in 2018. Unlike lots of Dungeon World supplements, it has a natural endpoint, and I played it from beginning to end. And then I played it some more at GauntletCon. So I played a ton of this, and this game works, and it changes what Dungeon World does in such a fundamental way that I can't not pick it for my 2018 pick. It turns on its head kind of what Spout Lore does. It changes the way that you have to GM the game in a really delightful way where you have to be more responsive and improvisational, and that's exactly what I like to do.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about it, as well as the other two Chaos Worlds supplements that Magpie puts out, also by Brendan Conway, the Green Law of Varkith and the Last Days of Anglekite. I know you've played Last Days of Anglekite. Have you tried Varkith yet?
I have not played Varkith yet. That is 2019.
2019. All right, awesome. You heard it here first, listeners. David's running Green Law of Varkith in 2019. That's exciting. Cool. Yeah, like I said, listeners, we actually did a pretty nice little breakdown of Cold Ruins of Lastlife on episode 59 of DR, so folks should definitely go check that out. Well, so David, before we go, maybe just give us an overview of what is the Cold Ruins of Lastlife?
Absolutely. So the Cold Ruins of Lastlife is a supplement for Dungeon World that is designed to emulate the concept of Dark Souls, as well as other media that's associated with that kind of fiction, where your player characters and most of the NPCs and monsters are going to be undead creatures. They are somewhat amnesiac, and they are wandering around a ruined world. Something happened. There was some apocalyptic event. We're not sure why, but that's part of what you're going to play to find out. And the player characters, though they are undead, they are seeking to find their hope in this cataclysm of a world. Is there hope in what they can build upon the ruins, or is there hope in the past if they can rediscover and figure out what their past was? Where does their hope lie? That's for your players and for your GM to decide. It's delightful to play.
Awesome. Was there anything else you want to say about it?
I think I could talk about it plenty more, but I will just defer to our episode of Discern Realities where we talked about it at length.
Awesome. Sounds good. Hey, David, thanks so much for being on the show. And hey, before we go, thanks so much for all your help this year with Gauntlet stuff.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of it. I hope to do lots more in 2019.
I will have lots more for you to do in 2019. Don't worry.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, David. Bye.
This is Alan R., a relative newbie to the Gauntlet, and my game of the year is probably invisible to and or unknown to many, if not most, Gauntleteers. It's a setting I've been playing in since the mid-80s. It's one I love, and it remains my low-magic fantasy setting of choice. It's called Harn World, published by Columbia Games and Celestia Inc. And in the last 12 months, I've played in or run Harn World games using Fiasco, Uprising the Dystopian Universe, Fate Accelerated, Alas the Awful Sea, Fellowship, Legacy 2nd Edition, Apocalypse World 2nd Edition, my own Dark Age hack of Monster of the Week, and my Fate of Harn hack of Fate Core. So Harn World is my game of the year because it demonstrates that a robust, detailed, consistent and coherent setting can provide a satisfying scaffold for many different games.
Hi, this is Horst, and my favorite game of 2018 is actually a module, The Gardens of Yin by Emmy Allen. It is a procedural point crawl set in an ever-shifting garden landscape that underwent a transformation after it had been abandoned by its original creators. I've chosen the module because it evokes a very distinctive atmosphere between whimsical and horrible, drawing inspiration from Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz, all the way to the island of Dr. Moreau and Roadside Picnic. There are talking cats, feuding chess sets, dim-witted mushroom men, and 20 different kind of oozes. Or to be precise, they are actually desserts, but desserts that are as deadly as they are tasty. The adventure pleasantly sets itself apart from the grim dark heavy metal aesthetic that is the hallmark of many other OSR products. But make no mistake, the further one travels into the gardens, the stranger the place gets. Plants are made from flesh, gravity is reversed, the earth opens up to reveal alien machinery, and so on. I had a blast running the module for the Gauntlet, and can't wait to try out Emmy's new adventure, The Stygian Library.
It's a tough choice, but my game of the year of 2018 is Troika because of my deep dive into it at this point.
Okay, listeners, I am here with my co-host from the Fear of a Black Dragon podcast, Tom McGrenery. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Jason. How are you going?
Very good, thank you. So, Tom, please tell our listeners what was your favorite game of 2018?
Well, I will do so willingly, but before I do that, I'd like to get in a couple of honourable mentions, if that's okay.
I'll allow it. Go for it.
All right, great. So I should preface this by saying one of the reasons they're honourable mentions is because the designers of both these games are known to me in a personal capacity as face-to-face gaming group members over like the last year or so. So I felt like it would be cheating to definitely put them in at number one. But yeah, I want to throw out a good shout out to Blue Home, the Home's D&D retro clone, which has been my go-to OSR system over the last year. It's down that end of, if you think of the OSR spectrum of being kind of hipster D&D at one end, kind of the art punk lot, and then at the other end is the sort of home craft movement. It's in that kind of nice, very detailed, meticulous, crafty end of the spectrum, and I like it. I like it a lot.
Awesome. What's your other honorable mention?
My other one is, actually, I mostly played this in 2017, but after you asked me this question last time, so I think it still counts, and I did get one session in January of 2018, and that is Best of Fiends by Stuart Chaplin. That's Fiends, which is like Friends, but with the R crossed out. Originally it was called We Used to Be Friends, but somebody else took that name. And I think you will like this, Jason, if I give you the capsule that it is to Monster Hearts as World of Dungeons is to Dungeon World.
Oh.
Yeah, so Stuart designed
that's appealing.
Yeah, right. He designed it for kind of one-shots primarily, but I actually used it to run the kind of 4-year East Texas University campaign, and it went very well, cool. So recommended there. But anyway, okay, so that's the preliminaries out of the way. I think you're not going to be surprised by my choice for Game of the Year. It's something we covered on Fear of a Black Dragon, and it is Ultraviolet Grasslands by Luca Reyes.
When you said, I don't think it'll be a surprise to you, I immediately thought, okay, it's either UVG, Slumbering Ursine Dunes, or Yun Suin. I was like, it's one of those three.
Yeah.
I don't know which one he's going to go for.
Pretty sure Yun Suin was my choice last year, so it was not that one. Yeah, but it's UVG, yeah.
So what about it? You love it? I mean, why was it your favorite?
I mean, I think it's just because it gave me such a different gaming experience, one that's stuck in my head ever since I played it. We did 4 sessions, 4 or 5, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we got so much done, so much travel. We explored so many interesting places, and although like you might take each part of UVG and say, well, this is clearly inspired by this, and that is clearly derived from that, when you combine it in the proportions that it's in, it's just really great. And it has those caravan traveling rules that set your basic unit of time as a week, which gives you this tremendous feeling of space and long travel. It's something that is easy to use, very rich and generous with its content. You know, you just get more and more. You just keep, every time you're at a destination, you think, oh, we've run out of stuff to do here. We'll just right over on the next page, there's a whole load more things to enjoy. So, I mean, it's really well put together. The art is great. The writing is evocative. I just have no quibbles with it at all, really.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I only know what I know of it from our preparation for that particular episode of Fear of a Black Dragon. But my limited exposure to it makes me think that it's something I want to run. It looks really, really good, really enjoyable. And it looks very adaptable to systems, which is really exciting to me. I know you used Apocalypse World, right, to run some sessions of it.
That's right, yeah.
And I could definitely see myself using like Wodu, Apocalypse World, maybe possibly even Dungeon World. I could see the material like adapting pretty easily to lots of different systems. And so I think that's pretty cool about it too. Well, that was a great pick for your favorite game of 2018. Before we go, Tom, I just want to say thank you to you for all of your help this year on Fear of a Black Dragon podcast.
Oh, it's been entirely my pleasure. Thank you for being such an amiable co-host. And of course, let us never forget to thank Paul Edson, who is the one who makes us sound cleverer than we are.
Indeed, indeed. Awesome. Well, thanks, Tom.
Take care.
Hi, I'm Ollie Jeffrey, and my game of the year is The Sword, the Crown, and the Unspeakable Power by Wheeltree Press. It was billed as kind of a PBTA Game of Thrones, and it can certainly do that, but it's got a lot more going on. The world building and the moves from both the player and the GM side push it towards a very weird and dark fantasy setting, and it plays equally well with the story gamers on the Gauntlet and my very grognardy home group. If you're after a game that's very much fantasy but shies away from cliche, then you're going to love it. I also want to give honourable mentions to The Between, which is still in playtest, but once it's released will almost certainly be a future game of the year, and Blades in the Dark, which is one of the most inspiring pieces of design that I've read since Dungeon World.
My name is Ludo, and my game of the year is Legend of the Five Rings. The efforts of new writers, international fans, and some very inclusive and diverse shows have vindicated it as a game about intrigue and people trapped between different demanding worlds, without having to lean on racism, Orientalism, misogyny, or homophobia. Happy New Year to all out there making every table safer, fun, and radically inclusive.
Hi everyone, my name is Rochelle Doobie. I'm also known as Meep on social media. My Twitter handle is @Pashka_D. I joined the Gauntlet this year, and I'm so glad I did. I'm new to tabletop role-playing, so it's been a little overwhelming with everything that the Gauntlet community offers, but I'd like to talk about my favorite setting and game for 2018. My favorite setting is The Wreck of the Void Star by Richard Ruane from Codex Cold. Richard ran a World of Dungeons pickup game using this setting for GauntletCon 2018, and I just fell in love with it. The whole time, I just kept saying to myself, oh my god, this is so cool. And I hope to play in this setting again in the future. So thanks for that, Richard. Next, my favorite game of 2018 is Nathan Pauletta's Mask of the Mummy Kings, originally in the zine Worlds Without Master number 9. This was one of the first series of sessions that I was able to play in the Gauntlet, with Jim Crocker facilitating. I was so surprised by how much fun I had, slipping, struggling, trying to come up with exciting and memorable ways to overcome obstacles. Despite having low stakes, the game still felt really satisfying. Thanks, Jim.
So, I am here with Jake Householder, who is a game designer and a visual designer, and some of you will know as our new layout artist for Codex. What's the most recent issue that you laid out?
Oh, we just finished Dark 2.
Oh, okay.
So that was exciting, and it included. So I didn't do all the layout for that one because Jesse Ross did all of it for Trophy, which is spectacular. So
yeah, but it's a beautiful issue overall.
Thanks.
So, what was your favorite game of this past year?
Yeah, so I didn't get to play a lot of games because life was pretty intense, and I was working on my own game and playtesting that a lot. But one that was a phenomenal, just like break from that intensity was the Japanese game Ryuutama.
Oh, so give us the elevator pitch for Ryuutama.
Yeah. Well, I think one of my favorite descriptions of Ryuutama is it's been likened to Miyazaki's Oregon Trail.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, on the book,
mm-hmm.
it calls itself a game of journey and wonder and the seasons. And it's really it's just full of this kind of pastoral beauty and slowness and all of that sort of stuff that I really kind of needed in
mm-hmm.
a game this year, I feel like. Basically, the pitch is you all play travelers, and in this world of Ryuutama, everyone is expected to go on a journey once in their life. And you kind of accept that in the fiction that, like, okay, you are a traveler beginning your journey, capital J. And that's kind of a nice setup just to kind of get things going. And so it's instantaneously about travel, and it's about those spaces between points where maybe sometimes not much happens, or those little encounters along the way. But regardless of where point A is and point B is for your journey, the game takes place in that in-between. And I think that's a really cool place for a game to exist,
Now, I know some people who've looked at it, and the book makes it, I think, look more complicated. How did you find learning the rules?
Yeah, I think it's one of those games that you can hit the game on all of the rules, but what's nice about it is even in the book it says like you can do this kind of like picnic style where you simplify all of the checks down to these things. You don't worry about rations and these sorts of things, and you just play based on some simplified rule set, which I think I would highly recommend trying if it's your first time or you're just going to do a one shot, because like you don't need all that extra stuff and you don't want to get bogged down in the rules of it too much.
Awesome.
But yeah, there is a ton of stuff there that you can pick and choose from. There's like a bestiary, and there's like all these different kinds of weapons, and you can have all these different kinds of tags in there like that make them worth more, and it can get to be a lot. But I find that the pared down rule set for it, that picnic style that they call, makes it play just fine, and I haven't felt like I've lost anything from it.
Awesome. And I'm going to ask you one last question. What class did you decide to play?
The classes in this game are wonderful to me too, because, they really mirror that sense of journey. The classes that you can play are minstrel, merchant, healer, hunter, artisan, noble, and farmer. And that's it. And then each class gets like a type. You can be like an attack farmer or a technical farmer or a magical farmer. So, there was no other choice for me than magical farmer.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I know the farmer is the one when I looked at the book, I was like, ooh, okay. That looks intriguing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I really hope that we see more Ryuutama on the schedule. I know some people have talked about putting it in the Gauntlets for, more for next year, so I hope we see more of that.
Yeah, I'm hoping to run it myself when I can get it up there.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Lowell.
All right. So these are Matthias' top 3 games of 2018. Of games past, Monster Hearts 2. No other game let me connect to people I haven't had a chance to play with before. More than this game about the experiences of queer youths. The friendships and connections that have grown from it are ever so dear to my heart. Of games present, Dungeon World. No, I'm not cheating. 2018 saw the release of the German translation. It's both a spectacular and beautiful edition of the game and an invaluable contribution to play culture for the German-speaking sphere. So thank you, Systematis folks, and keep up the great work. Of Games Future, oh, there's so many. BFF, Hearts of Wulin, Songs for the Dusk, all have me incredibly excited, but the one that really took my breath away was For the Queen. A game I was lucky enough to taste and that impressed me deeply with its elegance, accessibility, and dynamic. Can't wait for it for more people to play it. And hope you all had a lovely year and have a great new year. Thank you, Gauntlet, for an even better 2019 to everybody.
Hi, my name is Julian, and my favorite role-playing game of 2018 is Bluebeard's Bride by Whitney Strix Beltran, Marissa Kelly, and Sarah Richardson. This horror game is adapting a dark fairy tale about a young bride discovering that her husband, Bluebeard, has murdered his previous wives. I chose Bluebeard's Bride because I love how its horror is, uncommonly, a horror of interpretation and of telling stories. The eponymous bride alone interprets what she finds in the many rooms of her murderous husband's castle, thinking about what has happened here and to whom. As her, the players have to decide whether the stories of women's lives she tells, based on her investigations, the stories of what she found in those rooms, are going to be the ones that are expected of a loyal bride, or the ones that will get her killed. What's scary about Bluebeard's Bride isn't necessarily the weird or the alien or the repugnant, but an impossible decision, and with it, the dawning realization that all the murdered women in this house are the bride, and the bride is all of them, that there is no escape. Even as GM or groundskeeper, you get to somewhat live through this horror from the bride's perspective because the players are proposing the room's truths, not you. Bluebeard's Bride is a unique experience, an excellent design, and certainly my game of the year.
Hey there, Gauntlet. This is River. My favorite game of 2018 was Monster Hearts 2. As I've become more and more in tune with who I am as, a queer person and everything like that, I've begun to really branch out into, games that embrace those themes and to play with people who are like me. And I got a chance to do this with the illustrious Cat Ramen in October. Got to play several sessions as a Selkie named Wendy, who was precious and wrong and just delightful. And I also got to play in a one-shot at Queen City Conquest with some of the Gauntlet Canada crew, where I played a real just jerk of a fae, and I enjoyed that greatly as well. It's fun to test limits and play with those boundaries in a safe space, and Monster Hearts 2, specifically Monster Hearts 2, does a very good job of that. And as a honorable mention, I want to give a shout out to Wolf's Run by Philip Wessels. He and Richard Ruin and I played that over a long con in GauntletCon 2018, and it was uplifting and draining and queer and all about chosen family and exactly what I wanted out of a game at that time, especially in 2018. Thank you.
So I'm joined here by Rach Shelke, who you may know from the Plus One Forward podcast, who is also an organizer for Toronto's one of the premier gaming conventions, maybe the premier, Breakout. It is the premier. We will say it. Thank you for giving us your answer to this burning question. So, Rach, this is the hot question at the end of the year, and I know you've played a lot. So, I like to ask, what was the one you didn't choose? What was the one you battled on and didn't decide on?
So the one I battled on and didn't decide on was Urban Shadows.
Interesting.
For both games were for very personal reasons. The issue I had with Urban Shadows was I played in a little one-on-one campaign, but then me and my partner Rob went to Reykjavik because we played a game set in Reykjavik, and then we actually went to Reykjavik and did a road trip around Iceland. So I got to have that weird experience of like, okay, I've been on a flight for 6 hours. It was overnight. I didn't sleep. I'm sitting in a cafe that we featured in our game, and my character's apartment is a block away, and things are really weird right now. But that's not something a listener can actually sort of actualize on.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say, yeah, okay, so you want to run a campaign, now you want to get into a plane. I mean, it was just a beautiful sequence of events that all linked up. So it's not quite right for Game of the Year. Might be one of my events of the year, but not
right.
Game of the Year.
So, okay, Urban Shadows is the bridesmaid. So what's the winner? What's the big choice?
The game I eventually settled on was not a Powered by the Apocalypse game, but rather, yeah, right? Like, oh my God, not Powered by the Apocalypse. I went with Ryuutama, the natural fantasy role-playing game.
Awesome. So tell us what you dig about Ryuutama.
Ryuutama is a game that I've run a lot in one-shots for conventions. I've been doing it over the past 2 years, and my God, if you are going to read one role-playing game over this holiday season, you want to read Ryuutama. Ryuutama will reaffirm probably everything you love about games, everything you love about sitting down with friends at a table, everything that can light your mind on fire. The book has this. It comes from such a place of love and endearment for role-playing. I mean, the best way to get to this is to look at, but a lot of role-playing games have this, what's a role-playing game section, or what are role-playing games? Ryuutama has that little blurb that says, well, why are role-playing games fun? And talks about all the ways that they are exciting and fun. It's such a beautiful read. It's an interesting game to bring to the table because it's very disarming. We have, I think, within the North American community, certain expectations of what parts of the gaming industry look like and how they should, function, what they look like on the shelf. People look at Ryuutama, which is designed in a certain way to look very cute, very charming, very soft. It's also an incredibly traditional, almost vaguely OSR-ish game.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that, the juxtaposition there, because we have an expectation of, if I want to run something that's more older, it's going to look a particular way. It's going to have a particular aesthetic. And Ryuutama kind of takes that idea and throws it under the bus. It says, no, we're going to make a game that is going to look really cutesy, which I think has resulted in some of the misconceptions and frustration regarding the game in the community. Because a lot of people will say, I looked at this game and I didn't expect it to be trad, for one. And I expected something that would be a little bit more light in terms of design, or something that is a little bit more traditionally heartwarming in the story gaming sense.
Mm-hmm.
Something a little bit more like Golden Sky Stories.
Right.
On the other hand, Ryuutama does have a lot of, it has a very broad scope in terms of what it wants to talk about, where you have, one of the things, again, this is a game written from a place of love for the gaming community. You have a GMPC. The game says, okay, you're GMing your first game. You're going to make a GMPC. So here's the rules, because you have to make a GMPC. You don't get powers by being awesome. You get powers when your party succeeds and your players and characters do cool things. That's how you become empowered. But the scope of that, or the focus of what your GMPC could be, you could have the Azure Dragon, which is stories of friendship and communication and love. And then you also have the Black Dragon GMPC, who is about stories of assassination and danger and murder and fear. And those both exist in the same world. And I think, again, the aesthetics being what they are, undersell the game and the places it can go. And finally, it is a very trad game. It's a road trip game. It's a game about going on an adventure and how you set up your campfire and what side of the bed you wake up on and what stories you tell each other before you go to sleep. And it's not the only road trippy game, but I do love me a road trippy game. That's a very emotionally happy space for me.
That is an awesome pick. That's a great choice. Rach, thank you very much for giving us that pick. I said pick twice. So
it's okay. Thank you so much, Lil, for having me on to talk about my fave for 2018.
Okay, we are back, and now I am ready to reveal my favorite game of 2018. I am breaking the rules. I'm cheating.
No.
I am cheating, yes. I am breaking the rules that I wrote, and I am going to pick 2 games as my favorite of 2018.
That's so scandalous.
It is. I know. It is especially after so many people were like, can I pick 2 or 3? And I was like, no.
I know.
You can pick 1. It's favorite game of 2018. But I'm choosing 2. So I want to say that the 2 games I've chosen, first of all, are both Codex original games. Codex, of course, is the magazine that we publish in the Gauntlet. And for a little bit, I kind of felt like maybe it wasn't right for me to pick Codex originals to be my favorite games, because obviously I might be biased because I published them, but also it's kind of, it's something of a niche thing to some degree. And in the case of one of the games, you can't quite get it yet because it's not on drive-thru yet. It's only available to patrons. And so I had these thoughts, but ultimately my justification for why I thought it was okay to choose these games is, first of all, the games I have chosen are both really, really good. I mean, they are great. And that is number 1 criteria. Second, I feel like it's unfair to the designers of those games for me not to consider them just because I'm the publisher, right? We were talking about this before we started recording. The three of us, and particularly Kate and I, we are increasingly involved in different aspects of the tabletop role-playing game industry, but we are also tabletop role-playing game industry media people, right? And so we're in kind of like a weird space where we are interacting a lot with games that we have a connection to in some way, right? And so I've been super mindful of that. Like I've been very, I've really, really like weighed this and like considered whether I am giving my fullest, most honest opinion on this. And I believe I am. My tendency is to kind of instinctively exclude codex when I'm thinking of, quote, real publishing, and it's bullshit. And my tendency also is to minimize the importance of codex or to treat codex like it's this small, tiny thing. And it's kind of not. It is increasingly a big deal in the indie vector of the hobby. I'm not going to throw out any numbers, but Codex made a decent amount of money this year. I mean, if we're just using crude monetary valuations of things, if that's one way we're going to measure, that is a measure that Codex did pretty well on. The fact that I put almost all of that money back into the hands of creators and that I don't really organize the Gauntlet as a sort of like for-profit kind of thing necessarily. I don't think that minimizes the fact that Codex is a publication. It's a real publication, and the games in it are often very, very good. The final thing I want to say about it is, this is kind of to both of your points as well. When I was thinking about my favorite games of 2018, I was thinking about not just the games I've played, but I've been thinking about like my connection to role-playing games and the way I deal with role-playing games, the way I interact with them and all that kind of stuff. And Codex is just kind of undeniably a big part of my gaming year. I have to play these games. I have to play test these games. And it's just kind of unavoidable. And so that is kind of where I fell on that as far as why I felt comfortable choosing 2 games from Codex. Also, why did I choose 2? Well, it's not because I consider them both equal to one game. It's because I really couldn't decide between the 2 of them. And so I decided just to highlight both of them. So before I talk about the 2 games that I picked, I do want to call out a few honorable mentions because I did have kind of a tough time this year. In previous years for favorite games, there were what I consider to be like big, I don't know if obvious is the right word, but there were like kind of big marquee role-playing game experiences and indie RPGs that I played these games a lot, and it was kind of like an easy pick for me, right? Night Witches, Fall of Magic, Monster Hearts especially, right? Those games were pretty straightforward picks for me. They were a big part of my role-playing game year that year. And this year, it was really different. I mean, this year it was, I don't know what it is, but I felt like for me, there wasn't really a big game like that. And also, I think that the definition of indie role-playing games and games I want to play is really expanding, And so it kind of made it hard to like really narrow things down. My honorable mentions were Harlem Unbound, which I've spoken about a lot and is fantastic. Veil 2020 by Fraser Simons, which is a rules light version of his game The Veil, meant to be played with old cyberpunk modules. I had honorable mention for Unspeakable, a OSR setting that I love, and I love more every time I open the book. And another OSR adventure called Operation Unfathomable. Those were some of the games that were kind of jockeying for my favorite game position. But in the end, I chose these 2 games from Codex. So the 2 games I have chosen for my favorite games of 2018 are Midnight at the Oasis by Catherine Rahman and Storm Riders by Michael Barford. So let me start with Midnight at the Oasis. Listeners may not know what this is. I think I covered it on one episode earlier this year, but I can't quite recall. Dole, you might be able to.
Yeah, I think you did, actually, yeah.
Real briefly then, Midnight at the Oasis is a game about it's about a very particular queer subculture in the mid to late 90s. It is about a bar and restaurant, and one night they do every week, that is crossdresser night. And the story focuses on these people who are crossdressers, as well as some of their, quote, admirers, who are at the bar, hanging out, living their lives, being comfortable in their own skin, but also in some ways kind of like being just like in a different closet, you know, in a way. And the crux of the story is one of their friends, Dallas, has been gone for a year, getting ready for her transition. And each of the characters is really invested in Dallas's transition for different reasons, right? They have different kinds of emotional attachment to it. Well, the drama happens when Dallas shows up presenting as a man and not having undergone transition. And basically that's what the whole story is about. It has a little map, kind of like Fall of Magic, and you can move your pieces to different parts of the map and have different types of scenes where you are essentially exploring your feelings about Dallas, your feelings of how you feel comfortable at the Oasis, but also how you also feel like it's kind of its own closet, how you frequently feel othered or marginalized in society. The range of characters is very interesting. You have some that are like very new to cross-dressing, and you have, you know, and who are very progressive and liberal. You have one character who in their day-to-day life is extremely conservative. And so that's an interesting dynamic. And you have these scenes, and basically halfway through the game, Dallas shows up, and you then continue that. Once everybody's had a scene with Dallas, that kind of triggers the end game. We do epilogues and then it's over. It's just a one-shot game. The game is moving for so many reasons. When I was reading it, I was crying. I mean, I was like tears running down my face, crying as I was reading just the rules. And I'm reading it for to get ready to play test it, right? So I'm trying to stay in the moment and be focused on, is this mechanically sound? Is this going to be blah, 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 you know, but I was just crying. I was so, you know, kind of really emotionally done in by this game because Catherine has poured so much of herself into the text. It is just such a personal game. And myself as a gay man, I don't have a perfect understanding of what it's like to be someone in the 90s who considered themselves a cross-dresser. Maybe they were trans, maybe they weren't. You know, back in those days, we didn't have the same kind of support systems and vocabulary and stuff, right? So it's a little different. But, so I can't identify with that part of it, but I can identify as someone who finally finds a space where they belong and can breathe, they can kind of breathe for the first time. And so just from a sort of emotional standpoint, the game really resonated with me. But I've actually played it several times now, and frequently with people who are not queer. I have not yet played it with a trans man or trans woman. And everybody to a person has said I'm glad this game exists. I feel a measure of empathy I didn't have before. And also there's this sense of people I played it with, and it's my own sense too, that as the internet sort of becomes our support system, as it becomes our way of connecting with people, and as it kind of tears down certain barriers, there's lots of aspects of queer history that are kind of being lost to the mists, right? And this game does a really fabulous job of interrogating and exploring this very, very particular slice of queer culture that there's really no need for anymore, right? In a lot of sense. And so, yeah, the game is super fun. My favorite location on the map when you're playing is you are in front, you go to the bathrooms and you go to the mirrors and you're reapplying your lipstick and you have a monologue. That's where you monologue while you're reapplying your lipstick. And I just kind of love that visual. It's just such a great
so
touch.
Good.
Yeah. So this game is just so good. It has the feeling of a really beautiful indie film when you're playing it. And it's important, and I'm glad it exists. So that is one of my choices.
You know, it's really interesting. In the last few years, I've always felt like LARPs had kind of a monopoly on these games that were set in a very specific locale or time or space. And we've seen more and more of these games in standard tabletop RPGs where people have been, that aren't just micro games. They're substantial games like everything. There's a bunch of stuff in Seven Wonders from Pelgrane that does that. And, we've seen a lot of this, and I think that's a really interesting movement.
Actually, it's really funny. You mention it. The way that Midnight at the Oasis is set up, you could absolutely play it as a LARP. You could just go to a bar and pass out characters and say, at these locations, this is the kind of scene you do, right? You could totally do that. So it's actually an interesting idea. My other game that I chose was published in Codex Joy 2, and it is called Storm Riders. And Storm Riders, we have never talked about on the show, so this is kind of a first for Gauntlet podcast listeners. Storm Riders is a game that is based in part on World of Dungeons. It uses that kind of light mechanical framework to tell the story of 1980s cartoon action heroes. So think like in a fantasy setting. So think She-Ra, Masters of the Universe, Thundercats, that kind of thing, right? And the game is about telling those kinds of stories, like these sort of very like pop culture heavy, tropey 1980s action characters, right? And so like you have playbooks like the Royal, the Warrior, the Beast Rider, and like these other characters that kind of like slot into those tropes, right? The sidekick, right? Who's like all about comic relief. But what the game does, it's super interesting. It would be fun if it was just that, right? But what really elevates it is it has a Pasión de las Pasiones style meta layer to it. So you are not just playing your character in the cartoon, you are also playing an audience member, a child usually, but it could be anybody, I suppose. In the games I've played, it's been children. You play a child who is watching the show, who watches the show regularly, who perhaps learns lessons from the show. And we get to see like a glimpse of that child's like personal troubles at home and struggles and things like that as well. So you kind of get this like two-part story essentially. And it's actually divided a little bit more evenly than Pasión is. It's not quite half and half, but it's probably like somewhere like 60% action hero cartoon, 40% like audience member life, right? And so it's got that really interesting meta layer. It also has these really interesting creative constraints where you must obey broadcast standards and practices. So in your gameplay, you can have swords, but those swords can never draw blood. They can destroy robots. That's okay. But they can never like actually cut anything, any person. You can't glorify violence. You can't, or graphic violence. No sexual content at all and nothing like that. So you have to like play within these like creative constraints that are inspired by broadcast standards of the day. And also you have to consider the life of your audience member, right? And it is just so freaking fun. I mean, it is, in terms of just hands down delight and fun to play, it is so way up there for me. Like, I've only run it a few times at this point, but each of those sessions has been so freaking fun, like just a total delight. So it is a choice that I am like super proud to name one of my favorite games of 2018. It has this really great, there are a few like really interesting GM moves that play to this like meta idea. And one of them is on a miss, you can choose to let the player get whatever they wanted in the fiction. And instead, you call for a commercial break. You give them a short prompt like marshmallow cereal or, buddy dolls or something like that. And then the player who got the miss has to narrate a commercial that would be playing during the show. It is so much freaking fun. Like, I cannot express enough how fun it is. The game is just a delight, considering it's like crammed into something like 10 pages or something. It's like really, really full featured. It has lots of fabulous tables that you can use to inspire your play. And I'm really excited to see where it goes. Like, I'm I've scheduled some more games of it for February, and I really want to explore the idea of maybe the ideal audience member isn't a kid. Maybe it's an adult nerd who loved this show when he was a kid or she was a kid, and they're trying to convince their significant other or their partner to like the show as well, right? Like I could see lots of different kinds of like cool stories being told with this, and it's a delight. It's so fabulous. Whenever you're able to check it out, listeners, if you don't get Codex, you should definitely do so. So those were my choices. Let's go listen to the last of our community submissions. Okay, listeners, I am here with game designer and producer of the Pocket Size Play podcast, Fraser Simons. Hi, Fraser.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. Fraser, please tell us, what is your favorite game of 2018?
Well, to people that were reading the posts up on the Gauntlet, it probably comes as no surprise that it's The Between. It's the thing that got me blogging again. What?
That's super flattering. Wow. Well, listeners, that's my game, so that's really nice. Okay, well, so we should say at the outset that you actually, probably more than any other person, have the most experience with The Between, right? You've probably played in a total of like 15 sessions this year or something like that. So that's pretty awesome. So it's you're not just sucking up to me right now.
Exactly. I know what I'm talking about.
Well, so no, those were good blog posts, and we'll definitely link to those in the show notes. What do you like about The Between so far?
The most exciting thing to me, I think, is that the structure, like how it manages cognitive load, but also the overseen is like what's got me super hot for it, I think, is it's just like so unabashedly cinematic. And anyone who's listened to Pocket Size Play knows that I'm into cinematics.
You are into cinematic play. It is the thing you like. Yeah. That's awesome. I spent a lot of time thinking about the structure of the game, and that's one of the things in these early play tests that I am most happy about. I'm making a lot of changes to the game for the beta, but one of the things I'm not changing is the structure, particularly the overseen structure of the night phase. So yeah, I'm glad that's coming across good.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and I hadn't played anything like it as well. Like I don't generally play horror, so the whole like Victorian Penny Dreadful thing was completely new to me as well. So everything about the game was very fresh, and it also, I think, is like very illustrative of what the new kind of like, I don't know, quote unquote scene for PBTA is now, which feels like it's all in the Gauntlet, kind of.
Kind of, yeah. Well, I know what you're talking about because it's something that has been on my mind a lot lately. I mean, my view of like the next wave of PBTA, and I hope The Between is at the leading edge of this idea of kind of simplifying Powered by the Apocalypse and like kind of cutting away unnecessary moves. I think there was a couple of years where PBTA there's a lot of move bloat,
Yeah.
Cutting away a lot of moves and bringing in other subsystems and structures to help really give a very, very particular type of gameplay experience. And so, yeah, I'm happy to be helping out with that conversation for sure.
As well as like, I feel like the first wave and maybe even the second wave as well, they focused the playbooks on like exactly whatever the structure was about, whereas the new wave is usually compiling your fiction in such a way as to assemble the playbooks. Like it could be a very wider like birth, I guess, of the genre, where you can focus on specific tropes instead of having every single playbook line up with all of the tropes of the structure.
Yeah. I think I know what you're saying there. Like, I actually had this conversation on the Gauntlet podcast a little while ago. My feeling is that, people always say that Powered by the Apocalypse is great at doing genre emulation. It's even better at doing subgenre emulation, right? Like, can it do science fiction? Sure. I think there's a weird tension. It's a little uneasy to have science fiction PBTA games that try to do all kinds of science fiction. Like, I think it's too much, but you can kind of drill that down, right? Like you can take PBTA and do like the very, very narrow slice of science fiction, right? And that's what I'm doing here. Like with The Between, I'm trying to do like a very laser focused, particular kind of gothic horror, and it's working out okay so far, I think. But is that what you're kind of trying to say there earlier?
Yeah, that, and also like you'll get a very different between game depending on the who picks what playbook as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's actually a really good point. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you like my game. I mean, listeners should know that you have had a big influence on the game just because you have been so involved in the playtests, and several of the very key core mechanics that are going on I have changed based off the playtests and based off your specific feedback. So I'm delighted that the game is great for you. I'm very, very flattered that it was your favorite game of 2018. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
Just that people should buy it when it comes out, and I'm going to keep flogging you until it does.
And it'll be 2 years, but that's okay. The beta will be out by February of 2019, and then my hope is to kickstart it in early 2020. But the beta will be pretty complete. I plan for the beta to be basically the game.
Cool, like a kind of ashcan.
More or less, yeah. Essentially an ashcan. What the beta won't have is so. Half of the book, when it's finally published, will be my version or our version of London. And so there will be lots of setting detail, kind of like Duskfall and Blaze in the Dark, lots of very specific setting detail, but with the locations and stuff kind of presented in a way that reflects my particular GMing style. So lots of establishing questions, paint the scene questions, that kind of thing, right? And so a good portion of the book will be that very rich setting material. That won't be in the beta. The beta will be the core rules, the core playbooks, and maybe a little slice of the setting stuff. But so the game will be, and also the GM stuff. The GM stuff is very important in this game. So it'll have all that kind of core stuff. You just won't have all that extra kind of flavor stuff. You'll have to kind of make up London on your own.
Cool. I'm down.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you so much for all your help on Pocket Size Play this year, as well as We Hunt the Keepers.
Yeah, of course. No problem.
Hi, my name's David Morrison, and I've been playing games with the Gauntlet since the end of the summer now. I've played some excellent games over this time and throughout the year in general, but my favourite game of 2018 is a hard choice, but it is The Between by our very own Jason Cordova. It's not yet released, but I'm sure regular listeners will have heard a lot about it. I got a chance to play the game myself at 3 sessions of it at Gauntlet Con this year. Had a really good time. Some of the best roleplay I've played. Thanks very much to Jason and the other players for that. So the elevator pitch for it, I suppose, is it's a game of gothic monster hunters who have sexy and dangerous adventures in Victorian London, a city that wants you dead. The thing I really like is the way it sort of mechanizes and implements the gothic genre in a game. So you have these sort of interstitial scenes where you sort of give luscious descriptions of things around the city that shows sort of the darkness lurking below the everyday. You have the way the outcomes of actions are described by the GM, and the GM will always press into the darkest and the worst things that can happen to you and play really hard with that. But there's essentially a way of retconning what happened by using your Janus mask. And this isn't just a sort of extra life currency, but it actually allows you to sort of drip feed out your character backstory in a way that means you have secrets, but those secrets inform how the game shapes out. And I think it all really works well together to capture that sort of atmosphere of a gothic novel. It's a brilliant game, and when it is available, I encourage you all to check it out.
All right, so I am here with Rich Rogers, co-host of the Plus One Forward podcast and a master GM on the Gauntlet Hangouts, one of those people who runs a ton of games in many different series, and each year he and I sort of compete to see how many different games and how many rungs we can get on the ladder of insanity. So Rich, before we ask you the big question, before I ask you the one everyone wants to know, tell me about your year in gaming. What were your numbers like?
Numbers were, I don't think they were as high as last year. I ran or played in, by the year's end, I've got about 6 or 7 scheduled from this point of our recording through the rest of the year, so that I will achieve the ladder of insanity. Well, of course, you've reached the 10th rung months ago, long time ago,
a few weeks ago.
Okay. It feels like months to me. By year's end, I will have GM'd or played in 235 RPG sessions, live sessions. Wow. My highest count, which is Monster of the Week, that was my Sunday series of the Intercontinental Group of Awesome, was 22. And yeah, there were a bunch of new games to me that I played as well. I've had previous years where I was able to grab hold of more new to me games, but this year I was pretty happy with by year's end, because Paul is going to be running Star Force, and I've never gotten to play that. I'll be at 39 RPGs that I've played that I've never played before.
And you did the Star Wars Saturday throughout the whole year, and you wrapped up Gauntlet City Limits at the beginning of the year. So pretty sharp.
Thank you.
All right, Rich. So any honorable mentions before we get your biggie?
Absolutely. There are a few honorable mentions. The one that I would say, like a few weeks ago, I was thinking this was going to be the one. And let me tell you why it's not the number one. I feel pretty strongly that the game of the year pick that I want to make is a game that anyone can play. That's kind of the thing I have in +1 Forward. You know, when we have game focused episodes, one of the barriers to bringing someone on, except for the alphas episodes, the majority, if we're doing a game focused episode, it needs to be a game that people can get their hands on and they can play, right? Because I don't want to talk about a game that folks are like, oh, that sounds amazing, and then they're pestering me to get it, and I'm like, I can't because it's blah, blah, blah. So the reason that Nahual is not my game of the year for 2018 is that it may be the 2019 game of the year. Just recently completed the Kickstarter. You can't get hold of the play materials right now. I know that Mike is heavy in editing, and it is going to be a gorgeous, amazing product. I played 4 sessions of Nahual. Mike ran them all, and it was so very fun. It's got all of the juice that I enjoy with Monster of the Week, but then there are these neighborhood mechanics like your barrio. Nahual is a game that's set in Mexico, and you're angel hunters, but angels are not good guys. There's some cool American Gods style ideas here, in the idea of the conquistadores, when they came over, they brought their gods with them, and their gods are just as terrible as the conquistadors. So these angels have stayed there, and your Nahuals, they have the ability to like shapeshift into animal kind of hybrid forms and hunt them down. And it's so fun because there's even that really cool thing in, what's the giant mecha movie that came out a few years ago? And there was just a recent sequel that came out this year
Pacific
as well.
Rim?
That's it. Remember in Pacific Rim when you would fight the giant aliens, and then there was this whole black market selling parts of the aliens, and Ron Perlman had the little cameo. I loved that moment, right? Because it showed not just this big action movie, but a culture that has accepted that into the world, right? And a reflection of course, we're going to eat weird alien bits. That's what we stupid humans do. And Nahual, you don't just hunt the angels. You, like, one of your pack members can like chop them up and make them into little gree-grees and other things and sell it. So there's this whole culture of things around Nahual that is just it's really, really fun to play. I cannot wait to get it to the table and run it for Gauntlet.
And if you're that excited about that, I'm really curious what you have actually chosen.
My game of the year for 2018 is Impulse Drive. So Impulse Drive is, of course, this is the +1 Forward guy, is a Powered by the Apocalypse game. It is made for playing misfits in space. It's kind of a space opera style game. And there are a number of things about Impulse Drive that I have really enjoyed. So it's been iterating for years. Adrian Toon, who I had on the show during his Kickstarter, he has always had the most recent version of the game up on drive-thru, free to download or pay what you want. And you can download it and play it right now. I'm actually running it in my Star Wars Saturday series, and it's a brilliantly made game. I've loved watching it continually evolve and become more and more interesting to me. So there are a few things about Impulse Drive that make it the game of the year for me. First of all, right, like almost every time I ran it this year, it was in Star Wars, and it does Star Wars really well. There's a playbook called The Mystic that is really a Jedi with the serial numbers filed off.
Oh, yeah.
There are a number of playbooks that mix and match things like Babylon 5 and Star Wars and Mass Effect, the video game series, and Killjoys, and absolutely Firefly. And all of those playbooks can kind of mix and match those different ideas and tropes from the different space operas. And they're all a little gritty, which I love. They're not super shiny. Mm-hmm. There's a particular aspect of the game that partially is borrowed from Night Witches and a few other inspirations. A cycle of harm to stress to calamities. And that part is so fun because whenever you get in a heated battle, or, you know, whenever there's some kind of trauma that happens, any kind of conflict, you risk the possibility of building up your stress. And sometimes you may want to take that as physical harm, which can have mechanical impacts and make things more difficult, or you can always build up that stress track. Stress track is just this sticky thing that's difficult to get rid of. But once you hit 5, then you've got to mark a calamity. And the calamities are fascinating to me because some of the calamities, they're all specific to the playbook. Some of them are, oh, this is a pretty cool little thing, or this is a really bad thing. And you've got to mark on that list. And so you can start off having calamities that are great, really beneficial things. Yay, look at this awesome +1 that I've got. But eventually you're going to be marking the really painful things. And there are only so many, and you don't get any more back. And it reminds me of the kind of the doom from Monster of the Week. Mm-hmm. And when you've marked all of those calamities, your character's story is done. And each of those calamities have significant impacts on the story. So you really take things by the reins as a player. And I love that tactical choice where you can be angling towards the exit for your character, or you can play it safe. You know, you can always just take that physical harm. You can always kind of mix and match things and try to be savvy and hold on. But it's really built for a nice, solid mini series. This action-packed allows you to have some really big things happen without ever feeling like it goes gonzo to me. And that's an aspect of the Impulse game that I've really enjoyed watching people engage in. And I had an opportunity to play it a couple of times. Adrian ran it at Gauntlet Con this year, and I got up. I actually took an old man nap so that I could play it at midnight because he's a really different time zone than I am. And it was worth it. Adrian really taught me a lot about running the game when he ran a full session. It's super fun. Impulse Drive is a great game. I'm so happy the Kickstarter was successful. I think more people need to give it a shot because it's a finely tuned game, and it just got better over time. Remember when we played it?
Yeah.
And there were some suggestions that you made during the feedback session. I made sure Adrian got a look at it. He's so responsive to people as they engage with the game, so appreciative. And it's been a blessing to see him craft it.
And his responses to the criticisms were smart design decisions. I mean,
absolutely. He definitely, there, even the things where he's like, this is why he did, like, everything was a choice. And as he sees it played, he makes new decisions based off of that feedback. And he's not just there to live at our whim, but when you are, awesome Lowell are making suggestions, he listens. And it's really cool to see how he doesn't just take the words that you said, but he kind of cogitates on it and he redesigns the game a little bit and tweaks it.
Awesome. I think that's a great choice. Great choice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rich, for taking the time to do this for us.
Lowell, thank you for taking some time to chat with me. It's really great to share the game of the year. I love this episode. It's always fun.
It's super fun.
I'm Andy Haig, and my 2018 Game of the Year is Masks: A New Generation. I've had the delight of watching my playgroup encounter this game for the first time, leaning into the mechanics and being surprised by the ways their characters evolve. They started diving deeply into their concepts from the moment they got a hold of their playbooks, and we're diving into a story that none of us will forget anytime soon.
G'day, this is Blake Ryan from Australia. My favourite game for 2018 was Monster of the Week. I ran with a Halloween theme. The players sort of alternated from trying to help people out to what the hell is going on. It just worked really well. It was Donna, that Rob Bush guy, and Phil, and it sort of culminated with that Rob Bush guy's character was dressed as Thor in a Thor Halloween party costume, and some Eta caps came out from the trees, and he threw a foam hammer at them, and I lost it. I couldn't stop laughing, but just worked really well. Thanks. Happy gaming, all.
Hey everyone, Jim Crocker here. For my 2018 favorite game, I'm going to pick Velvet Glove by Sarah Richardson. It's an apocalypse-powered story game of the tough lives of urban girl gangs in the 70s. With her permission, I ran a drift of it set at a summer camp for both my Camp Nerdly and Gauntlet debuts as a GM, and I was lucky enough to get into the session that Sarah herself ran for Gauntlet Con. The stories it tells are typically harrowing and maybe a little grim, but every single session I've played has been suffused with an unexpected joy in the players taking action together, even when things go south, and I very rarely get that out of any other game. It's pretty great.
Okay, I am here with Will Patterson. Will is the editor and director of the Gauntlet blog, the relatively new, but I guess it's been going for a while now, Gauntlet blog. Will, welcome to the Gauntlet podcast.
Thanks. Happy to be here. It's good to talk to you again, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Will, please tell us, what is your favorite game of 2018?
I actually have really limited options compared to most Gauntleteers, probably. I only played 4 different systems this year.
Okay, that's fair enough.
So the contenders for me are Dungeon World, D&D 5th Edition, Blades in the Dark, and the simplified World of Dungeons hack that I play almost every day with my kids, the one that's on the blog.
Oh, yeah, the Little Dreams thing, right?
No, that's actually...
Oh, that's a different thing?
No, this is just, it's like... It's super, like even more simplified World of Dungeons. They're still super hyped about that. But from those 4 options, I'm going to have to go with Blades in the Dark as my game of 2018.
Awesome.
Earlier
Good
this
choice.
year, I co-GM'd a cultist campaign that lasted a couple of dozen sessions. We rotated GMs, and it just had some fantastic moments. In fact, you might appreciate this as a fellow lawyer. One session consisted almost entirely of a single score that was negotiating a contract with a demon. And somehow John Harper's system managed to make contract negotiations fun. And I think you know how impressive that is.
That is pretty impressive, I have to agree. Well, so Blaze in the Dark, I mean, obviously that's a game that doesn't need any kind of endorsement from you or me, but I'm curious, what is it about the system compared to maybe some of the other things you've been playing, or just your experience with role-playing games in general, that really makes it sing for you?
Yeah, I was really put off by Blades when I had heard about it and basically barely skimmed it.
You scoundrel.
Yeah, too crunchy for me. I just thought that the negotiating dice pools thing would take too much time. But Slack was raving about it. I dug in. I listened to Kyle Thompson's How to Play video series.
Oh, it's really good. Yeah, that's how I kind of learned it too.
Yeah, so. And the system really sang for us. But it might be more accurate to say that I said 2018 is my year of the Blades. It might be more accurate to say that 2018 was my year of the engagement role. Like, I just totally fell in love with that mechanic. I've put it in everything I play now. And I think that almost that alone was what made Blades sing so much to me. It fixed the days of getting mired down in planning, endless planning. She's like, hey, let's just skip this, guys. Let's do a flashback and move on. So that was part of it. and just the actual setting is great. I really dug into that. I picked up Lies of Locke Lamora because of that. Really enjoyed that series.
David keeps recommending that book to me. He keeps saying like, oh, if you love the Blades setting, you really need to read Lies of Locke Lamora.
Blades is basically Lies of Locke Lamora, the RPG. So. Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, well, so David and I on Discern Realities, we used to do that actual play that took place in that kind of Venice-like city. I don't know if you remember that one or not, but one of the Castafiel stories. And he would always be like, oh, this is so much like Lies of Locke Lamora. Like, you've read it. I'm like, no, I haven't read it. I have not read it. I promise you. It's like, if I read books and I don't, because of law school still mostly,
just traumatized.
Like reading for pleasure is something that's been shot for me for years, which really sucks. But
that's a shame.
Yeah, but whenever I do rarely pick up a book, I think I want to put that at the top of the list at some point. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I like the engagement roll too. The engagement roll it's such an efficient way of diving right into the action, right? I mean, obviously, like, we get to kind of abstract out this sort of like planning phases of games like this, right? Which is terrific. But also the result of the roll, if I'm remembering how it goes correctly, basically like kind of gives you the sort of disposition, right? Like, are you going in clean? Are you going, is it going to be complicated or a problem? And it really, really just like the action just kind of fires off like straight away from that, which is pretty great.
Yeah. And it was almost in practice, it was almost that same like roll for initiative that the GM in D&D will do to intense drama. It's like, all right, let's get to the engagement roll, and suddenly everyone's like, oh,
yeah, everybody's on. Yeah, I remember that from when I ran it too. Yeah. Well, that is a really terrific choice. Can I just ask you out of curiosity, how many sessions of Blades have you played at this point? Because it seems like such a long-term game to me, right?
Yeah, I believe that our campaign went 22 sessions.
Nice. Wow, that's really good. Okay, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, we really put in some time, and we were the cultist group, and we had every single cultist, feat for the gang, and all of our guys were just out of control. I played the slide when I was not the GM, and I loved the slide. It sang for me.
Well, that is a pretty fantastic choice. Is there anything else you want to say about it before we go?
No, I don't think so. Just if you get a chance, try it out, and I guess I'll join David and recommend
two of you try it out.
Anyone who hasn't tried it out,
the two of you listening who have not played Blades in the Dark, go ahead and give that a shot. No, that's awesome. Hey, before we go, I want to just say thank you to you for all of your help on getting the blog launched this year, and I think the blog is. I feel like we are ramping up to it being a big, super awesome, important thing. It's going to happen in 2019.
I think so too. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, the content, right out of the gate, the content was really great. So yeah, I think we're going to really hit our stride in 2019. I can feel it. I can feel the Annie nomination coming, Will, which is literally all I care about. So no, it's not true.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it is, aspirational. It's good, right? Awesome. Well, like I said, thanks so much for that. And thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Take care.
Hello, Gauntleteers. My name is Lloyd, and I would like to recommend Scum and Villainy by Evil Heart Productions as my favorite game of 2018. I went into this slightly blind, a little bit jaded, because as much as I love playing Blades in the Dark, the game is a little too dark for me. I don't really want to explore that version of myself. I prefer more to play more like heroes in a kind of way, going through fun, exciting adventures. And Blades in the Dark is just about evil people doing evil things for other evil people. And it's just a downward spiral into badness. And it's never really appealed to me that much. So I was a little jaded about this book. But the second I took a look at it and actually played it, I realized how wrong I was. All of the fun, adventure, sci-fi stuff I wanted, it's all in here. Everything you wanted to see in some kind of like Firefly/Star Wars, but not Star Wars, we're going to say it's not Star Wars, don't tell anyone, is all based down in the Scum and Villainy book. You can do everything from the Blades in the Dark era, so your high heist adventure, your planning, your going in, your flashbacks, all of that. But now it's in a sort of like pseudo hustle Firefly sort of sci-fi kind of way, kind of your Space 1889 if you want to go that weird. It's Farscape, all of that. It's all put down. Killjoys, Jesus Christ. This game plays Killjoy so well. I really enjoy the way it looks. I love the way it feels. If you want to try playing a fun space romp using the Blaze in the Dark rules. Highly recommend Scum and Villainy. 100%. Give it a shot. You will not regret it. It will not let you down. It will run your Firefly, run your Farscape, it will run your Blake 7. Yes, you heard me. Blake 7. It's coming back, guys. Play the game. It will make you play Blake 7. Blake 7 is amazing.
Hey Gauntleteers, this is Justin, aka Mothlands on Twitter and elsewhere. And I have to say that this year my game of the year has to be John Harper's Blades in the Dark, and I know that that's a popular choice, perhaps, but as someone who missed the origins of PBTA, Blades in the Dark and more importantly Forged in the Dark have really spurred my imagination as to design and creativity. And when I've run the game, I've had excellent experiences tinged with beautiful moments of tension and release and action, and I am in love with flashbacks, and I can't imagine games of this genre not having that mechanic ever again. So yeah, Blades in the Dark.
So I am here with one half of one of the power couples of the Gauntlet. Tyler is here with me. Patrick is unfortunately under the weather, but I'm hoping that we'll catch him on a later round of this, getting the favorite games of 2018, because I'm seriously interested in both of their answers. So, Tyler, I have talked to a lot of people, and every time they go, gee, I can't make up my mind. So tell me, what did you think about, and how did you kind of come to your decision about the best game for you or favorite game for you?
It was hard because I've played a lot of really fantastic games this year. I kind of was going with ideas of things I'd seen different out of a system, things that I thought the system did that really supported the players and the GM, and also, you know, that kind of it factor of it just brought in so much creativity, so much excitement.
Awesome. Yeah, before you tell us the winner, do you have a one that you were wrestling with? Do you have a runner-up?
I'll say that your version of Changeling was one which I really was extremely excited about. The amount of work you put into it was magnificent. It was so evocative, and it was so much of what I wanted to see from Changeling put into Powered by the Apocalypse. It's not always easy to bring that same feel of World of Darkness into something else, and it did perfectly.
Well, I'm really glad you enjoyed it. But it is the runner-up, so what did you choose? What is your winner?
My winner is Spacewurm versus Moonicorn by John Stone Metzger.
Okay, so tell us why. And I want to say this, if you don't know about the game, Tyler's the one who has brought this to the table like no one else has in our group, a game that I looked at and I was like, wow, I don't know if I can run this. So tell us about this.
Well, one of the things I really liked about it, and really enjoy about it, is it has a deep world build to it. And I'm a huge fan of world build. John Stone managed to take these fronts, these parts of the galaxy, boiling down to 7 of the really iconic things that make up a history and a power structure of a galactic sort of game. And for each one, he does a relatively intricate version of what makes it. What for the Imperial throne, what does that emperor look like? What sort of structure is that? And it does something for that, for secret police, for the religion, for the economics, all of these things that once you boil them down at the beginning of the game as a group, and it's done completely as a group, you have developed a very fully fleshed area to play in. And it's interactive. It's not something that's just laid down to the players. It's something everybody's creating together. And I found that fascinating.
That's great. How many you ran it like several different times this year?
I have. I've run it twice. No, I apologize. 3 times. And I'm starting to run another session of it just tomorrow.
Awesome. That's great. I'm so glad that that's getting at the table, and that is a great pick. Great pick.
What I have to say is, too, he does something that I think is brilliant. He has a full campaign style of the game, and then he has a quick play game style of the game. That quick play is spectacular, and it gives all the same flavor without going into nearly as much depth to it. You don't have to worry as much about XP, but in a 4-session run, that quick play, it just sang. It was just fantastic.
Wow. Awesome. It's such a cool game. Anything else you want to say?
No, I suppose not really. That kind of wraps it all up.
Great. That's a good pick. Thank you so much, Tyler, and I will work on catching Patrick later this week.
All right.
Hi, my name is Stephen Watkins, and my favorite game from 2018 is Camden Wright's One Child's Heart. This is a game where players play characters who enter the memories of a troubled teenager. These characters play protective roles such as medical professionals, teachers, or police officers. While they cannot alter the memories of this child as they have already happened, they can help the child to develop the skills and coping mechanisms in order to deal with a difficult and unfair life. This game evoked such a sense of community and perspective that it has stuck with me for a long time. The game is currently in playtest, and I can't wait to get a copy of One Child's Heart so that I can play this game again.
Hi everyone, I am Patrick, also known online as Fictive Fun. My favorite game of 2018 was Eden by Mark Hobbs. Eden was released in 2017, therefore is not the shiny new thing on the tabletop gaming block, but it was the game that surprised me the most in 2018. Eden is a great example of a storytelling game with no mechanics contained in a wonderful collaborative setting. You play as the only humans in the Garden of Eden, surrounded by animals that teach you skills and life lessons. The reason this game surprised me is the depth of enjoyment we had while playing in a game in which all the rules revolve around the setting rather than event resolutions or randomness. There were laughs and heartwarming moments throughout our session, and I look forward to playing it again in the future and encourage you to try it out yourself. The game is Eden, and it's by Mark Hobbs. Thank you, and I wish every one of you a fruitful 2019.
So I'm here with Yoshi Creelman, who is a veteran GM and player here on the Gauntlet, and he's also the coordinator for Gauntlet Games Now. And I've had the pleasure of playing with him in person, which is awesome. He's a great player and a super nice person. So Yoshi, I'm going to ask you what your big game was. What got pushed out? Was there one that was your sort of second choice that you had to deliberate on, or was your first choice it?
So like when I was thinking about what games that I would nominate and like decide between, there were two games that came immediately to the top. The one that got pushed out is Good Society. It's not out yet, but like as soon as I had pitched it, there was just so much enthusiasm for it, and like I had some really great sessions for it. And so like that was the one that I'm like, this is really great, but it's not quite the game that was actually what I picked, which is Dialect.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Dialect, a game about language and how it dies, for me is probably my favorite game of 2018, because like this is when it first finally got printed. It came out in June is when like everything came out, but they gave out the print and play earlier in the spring. And so like as soon as that came out, I printed out the cards and I ran it at New Mexicon. And I had played it with Hakan and Kate before twice. And so I had played it a little bit, but like I pitched it and had an absolutely wonderful session at New Mexicon. And like since then, it has basically become my go-to staple for my one-shot game.
Oh,
so
really?
like if I need, whenever I go to a physical con, I throw it into my bag. So I have a copy. So if we ever get that time where it's like, hey, we've got a bunch of people here, let's play something, or like if I'm at Games on Demand and somebody's like, hey, I need another game, like I need another GM, I'm like, hey, I can pitch you a game of Dialect right now, like because it's zero prep for me. I can have all my materials just printed out. I've got some of the like backdrops laminated, so it's totally my like go-to one-shot game, and I've got it all set up in Roll20. So if I need to do it online, I'm like, I can do this. Give me 5 minutes. Let me go copy the existing base game I've already set up, and I can pitch and I can run a game of Dialect online in 5 minutes too.
When you have to like introduce this or give the pitch to someone, what do you say?
So usually I say Dialect is a game about language and how it dies. So we're going to be playing a group of people who play in an isolated community. We'll decide later what that community looks like based on what backdrop we have. We'll do a little world building on exactly what it means. But we know going in that they have their own language there that they've developed because they're isolated from everything else. And through the course of the game, we're going to develop and see what that looks like. But we're also going to see foreshadows of how this community no longer becomes isolated, how their language dies out. And that's either going to be because they get reintegrated into society or because they cease to exist and their language dies out. Those are usually the two options that you see in a lot of these backdrops. So going in that it's not going to be a happy, like, we're all going to win storyline. You can have happy arcs in here, but like, you're not going to change the history. Like, the language will die out, and we're going to see what people do and how they react. And one individual story can be epic and happy and jubilant, but there's always going to be that tinge of sadness with it.
Wow. Oh, that is a great pitch. That is a great pitch. I can see why you dig it. And what a great pick, too. Good choice. Thank you so much for giving us the brief on that.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Glad to do it.
That was our show. Listeners, I want to, first of all, thank you for hanging in with the Gauntlet podcast all year. We hope that you have enjoyed the Hangouts Roundups. We hope you have enjoyed GM Masterclass. We hope you have enjoyed some of the game designer interviews we've done this year. And we really hope you love this episode and that you go out and play these games and love these games. Lowell, do you have any other thoughts before we go?
No, it's just been a solid year. I've enjoyed a lot of stuff. I've played a lot of different games, and I found a lot of games I loved.
Awesome. Kate, any closing thoughts?
I really miss gaming and I want to come back.
You make that your New Year's resolution. You will game more in 2019.
No, it's not my resolution for 2019. I want to be more present in the community spaces I'm in, including the Gauntlet. And that will mean less gaming, ultimately. And I'm okay with that.
We'll work it out. We'll see. Awesome. Well, listeners, if you want to get in touch with us, the best place to go is our website, gauntlet-rpg.com. There you can find links to everything we do. We are also on Patreon at patreon.com/gauntlet and Twitter at GauntletRPG. Have a great evening, afternoon, day, whatever it is for you. Week.
New Year?
Yeah. Hell yeah. Give it a whole week. Have a great week, listeners. Bye-bye.